Hello, everyone. We're here at St. Mary of the Angels Church, and we're going to talk about something that's affecting all of our lives. One of the ways that life has changed dramatically in the last quarter century is this whole phenomenon of the internet. Things that we didn't even think about before have now changed our lives, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. And that brings us up to the topic tonight, which is on social media and families. Friends or foes, it depends on you. We're honored to have as our guest today an expert in the field of social media. This is her professional work, Katy Hinderer, who's going to describe for you what she's learned from working in this field. And I think she's going to have some surprises for all of us, because this is not an area that we can neglect. We'll have time open for some questions, either from you in the land of the video, or from the studio here, so to speak, the museum room of St. Mary of the Angels. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Katy Hinderer.
All right. Thank you. I'm excited to be here tonight and share what I know about social media and the families. Let me give you a little bit of my background before we launch into it. So, almost 13 years ago, I started a lifestyle blog, and from there kind of took off using my journalism background to really start exploring social media and all of that. And I started an Instagram account 9 years ago, Facebook, and then took off from there. And I have been a full-time blogger and Instagram influencer. And then last year I started my own business, coaching and providing strategies for small businesses to learn how to use social media effectively and profitably for their business. So that's kind of my background in a really quick nutshell, but let's dive into the topic at hand today. So I always like to share this graphic first, which is what the internet looks like in 1 minute every day. So this is 60 seconds on the internet, and as you can see, 2.5 million Snapchats are created, Snaps are created, 1,400 downloads on TikTok, and these numbers I would guess are outdated, and they're probably much higher now. This is actually a graphic from the beginning of 2020. I haven't found one yet for 2021, but it gives you an idea of what it looks like in just 1 minute. And so every day we've got a lot of minutes, and so a lot of this is happening on the internet. And so I shared this graphic because I think it's important to realize some people think like, let's not use social media, let's not talk about new technology, and maybe it'll go away. And this makes it very clear it's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. And so let's figure out how to use it really well. Let's figure out how to use it in an authentic way, in a way to speak truth and that. So just want to share that before we move on. So when I was thinking about the topic of social media, friend or foe, I kept coming back to this idea that basically it's all about a tool, and whether you are going to allow yourself and your children and the people in your family to be used as a tool for social media, or are you going to use social media as a tool for you and for your purpose and for what you would like to do. And that really is the differentiating factor between whether social media is friend or foe for you and for your family. So I'm going to dive into a couple different ways in which we can make sure that we're using social media as a tool, and we can make sure that we are not being used as a tool by social media apps. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. And I know the topic is family, right? Social media and families. And so I think the important thing to start with is thinking you, as the parents, as the guardians, as the adults, want to model the behavior you want from your children when it comes to social media. And I think we can do this in 3 ways. And so we'll dive into those 3 ways, and we'll talk about how to use social media as a tool. So the first is the difference between social media being the dictator or you being the decision maker. And you probably know about the idea of dopamine, and when social media, when we have our favorite app, maybe that's Instagram, maybe that's Twitter, maybe that's Facebook. For the younger generation, that might be TikTok or something like that, right? And every time you see that little icon, your brain releases a little bit of dopamine and tells you, this is good, this is great, I want more. right? And so social media was designed with that in mind. It was designed to grab us and to pull us in and to keep us as long as possible using that app. And so when we see those things, it becomes the dictator. And it takes away that decision making from us and tells us, like, get on this app and spend as much time as possible on the app. So how can we change that? How can we take the dictator away from social media and become the decision maker? And here are a couple ways that I think we can do that. First is the idea of turning off your notifications. So your notifications on social media are the way that social media is the dictator. You get a push notification, this notification pops up on your phone and it says, you have a new message, or you have a new like, or you have a new direct message, or a new follower, or a new friend. And that little notification is that app's way of dictating your next behavior. Because you're probably going to then click on that notification and go into the app. And once they've got you there, then they want to keep you there. So if we turn off all the notifications from all the various social media apps we have, we take that dictatorship out of the possibility and we become the decision maker. I decide when I'm getting on Instagram, or I get to decide when I'm getting on Facebook. This push notification isn't deciding for me. So I will tell you that personally, I have all of my notifications off for every social media platform I'm on, and I'm on a lot since that's my job. And the only notifications that pop up on my phone is when my phone rings or when I get text message from a certain group of people, and that's it. I don't get any messages from Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or any of those kinds of things. So you can turn off all those notifications. You can even turn off the email notifications you get from something like LinkedIn, for instance, right? LinkedIn sends you a notification and says you have a new message or you have a new contact, or 23 people have looked at your profile this week, right? And what it does that to make you click on it. And you can actually unsubscribe from those emails. The next thing I think is really good in being the decision maker of your social media is to remove the most tempting apps from your home screen. So that first screen you see when you turn your phone on or when you log on. Why? Because just the image, science has showed us that just the image of that app, just that tiny little icon, so whether it's Instagram and it's that like colorful camera, or Twitter and it's just the blue background with the white bird, when we see that and it's our favorite app, our brain automatically already releases dopamine. We don't even have to get into the app for that release to happen. And so therefore, we want more, right? And we need more and more to be able to keep hitting that same high. And so if we remove that app from our home screen, from that first page that we're going to see on our phone, we will remove some of that automatic dopamine that makes us click it and go there. And I'm sure we've all been there. You grab your phone to send a really quick text message, and you get lost in your phone, and 20 minutes later you put your phone down and realize, I never sent that message. Because we got lost in, we saw that icon, we hopped on that, we just checked something really quick, and then we never sent the text message we meant to send. And that's because these apps have been designed that way, right? To kind of pull us in. And so for me, I put all of my favorite apps on the last screen on my phone, or I hide them in one of the folders that you can do on iPhone. I know you can do that on Androids as well. So that's another way. The third way that I think it's really important for us to be the decision makers, and we can do that, is to kind of communicate your boundaries a little unapologetically about your use of social media and technology. So to give you an example, maybe you don't check your work emails on the weekend. And to just tell people that. Or maybe you put an away message up every weekend and say, I don't check my emails on the weekends. I will respond to your email on Monday morning when I'm back in the office. Something like that. Because in this day and age, everyone expects you to always be on and always be available. And when you always have your phone with you, you always have your email ready, right? You always are there. And so we need to kind of create those little boundaries and let people know them so that they know what to expect, right? And they don't expect us to be responding on time. In the time that they want, and do that. I have friends who only check their emails, their work emails, 3 times a day. When they get there in the morning, once right around lunch, and then once right before they leave. And they tell their coworkers and their bosses that, like, I'm only doing it 3 times so that I can have deep work during all the other times, and that's how they do it. So just communicating that and then kind of keeping those boundaries can be really great. And then the last is just kind of closing all the tabs. We all have done it where you have like 100 tabs open on your browser, right? Because you have your email open, and then you have a couple social media apps, and then things you're searching, and then maybe your work website or your kids' grades or anything like that. And when we have all the various tabs open, our attention just hops from one to one, right? And we're never really focused on anything. And again, when we do that, we're allowing social media and this technology to be the dictator of how we spend our time and what we give attention to, as opposed to us choosing to be the decision makers and be like, okay, now is my email time. Now is my online shopping time. Now is my time to check my child's grades or to whatever that happens to be. So these are all different ways in which we can kind of use social media as a tool, not be the tool for social media, and really be that decision maker. The next one is the difference between who we want others to see on social media versus who we actually are. And this, I think, is huge for everybody, but especially for the teens and the tweens who have social media. That often they want to portray themselves, and we do this too, we want to portray ourselves as something that we are not, because it seems cooler, or it seems more popular, or it seems better. I think this can happen a lot too. I have a couple of friends who are young moms, and they follow mommy bloggers online, and they see all these moms, and they have like their beautiful children all perfectly matched and all looking absolutely perfect in the perfectly clean kitchen, and they see these things and they feel like they're not worthy, right? Or that they're not doing enough as a mother, or they're not good enough. And so then they also post these very perfect looking images to make it seem like they too are that way. And so kind of finding that balance between posting who we really are and not posting who we think other people want us to see. And this ultimately comes down to authenticity. My usual talk is on authenticity on social media, so I could talk about authenticity for like an hour, but I won't. But this is my favorite kind of definition and explanation of what authenticity looks like, especially when you're talking social media. Authenticity is a collection of choices that we make every day. It's about the choice to show up and be real, the choice to be honest, the choice to let our true selves be seen. And this is from Brené Brown. She's kind of one of the queens of authenticity. But to think, when we post on social media, when we show up on social media, we want to show up as our authentic selves. We want to show up as life is and not try and create this false persona, this facade for who we really are not, but who we think people want us to see. And the way I like to describe this best is the difference between the highlight reel and the movie trailer. Okay, so the highlight reel is what we want others to see. And social media is often called, especially Instagram, for instance, or even Facebook, the highlight reel, right? It's just all these perfect pictures and all these perfect images, and here's the highlight of my life, and you never see any of the bad sides or the dark sides or the messy kitchen or whatever. I like to think about, when you're creating social media posts and content, to think of it more like the movie trailer. So if you think of a movie trailer, it gives you all the kind of general ideas of what the movie's going to be about, right? Kind of a brief summary. It doesn't give you all the details, because not every stranger deserves all the details of your life, the same way the movie people want you to actually go see the movie. But also a movie trailer gives you the idea of kind of the players, the characters. It shows you some of the darker sides, some of the lighter sides, right? It's trying to give you a general feel for what you're going to get from the movie. But it's not a highlight reel, because it also shows you some of the downside or some of the trauma or the drama that's going to happen in the movie. So if we kind of take that idea and apply it to social media, to think, instead of giving this perfectly curated, beautiful, perfect looking highlight reel, to think, how can I provide the movie trailer of my life on social media, right? And not that we have to post everything, but to think, when I'm going to post, can I post more authentically of who I am? Can I provide a little bit more of that movie trailer and a little bit less of the highlight reel? One other thing that I think is important to think about when we're thinking social media and the difference between who we are versus who we want others to see is the idea of the comparison trap. And this happens, and we talk about this a lot with teenagers. And when I give this kind of talk, for teenagers, this is something that we talk about a ton, because they look at others and then they feel unworthy, or they feel like they're not good enough, or they feel like they're not pretty enough, they're not skinny enough, they're not athletic enough, they're not whatever enough. And this is something that we can all fall into, that we look at these other people and we fall into this trap of just comparing ourselves to others. And it's really interesting because comparing ourselves to others is a biological thing that we do, we've always done from, way, way, way back. But it was like we compare ourselves to other early tribes of people to figure out, like, am I a good enough hunter? Will I survive, right? Through the winter, and we're comparing ourselves to others to figure out where do I fall. But now, with social media, we're comparing ourselves, or we can, compare ourselves to thousands of absolute strangers that make no difference in my actual survival, which is why we had comparison in the beginning. And so that can be a really good thing for us to take a step back and think, okay, do I really need to be comparing myself to this person over here? And do I really know her movie trailer or his movie trailer, or do I know more of the highlight reel? And to think that through. So how do we kind of use this and think social media as a tool, not us becoming a tool? The first way, I think, is to eliminate what I call social media triggers. So anything that triggers you to think I'm not enough, or I need to show up as something other than myself. And then get rid of those. So maybe that means unfollow those accounts. Maybe it means unfriending those accounts on Facebook, or not following certain brands or certain celebrities or whoever that happens to be. And if you're thinking, wait, but my cousin or my sister is a trigger for me sometimes, or I don't know, whoever, I can't unfollow them or I can't unfriend them. The nice thing is on Instagram and on Facebook, there's a way that you can mute the people. So you are not unfollowing them, but you're not seeing their things show up in your feed anymore. And so you're eliminating that trigger to give yourself a little bit of distance from all of this. The second is to pause before you post. So before you post something on any kind of social media platform, to step back and think, like, is this truly me, right? Is this authentically me? Is this what I want to communicate out to the world? Is this true? Is this necessary, right? Like, kind of going through all of that and like taking a second before we post to really think those things through. And then to create before we consume. And this, I think, is a really good one, because often we get on any kind of social media platform and we're scrolling and we're scrolling and we're scrolling and we're scrolling and we're consuming all of this information and we're taking all of this stuff in and we're feeling not enough or not good enough, or like we need to look a certain way. And then when we create a post, we're often creating based on what we consumed, not based on who we are. And so when I tell people, especially in my line of work where I'm working with influencers and other brands, I always tell them you should make all of your social media posts first, and then go and consume content and see what other people are putting out there, etc., so that you're actually showing up as who you are and not as something else. Before we move on to the third one, I want to share a brief story with you, and this is kind of a personal story, but on the importance of authenticity and really showing up as we are. So as a blogger and kind of Instagram influencer, I work with a lot of different brands on social media posts and collaborations and that kind of a thing. And so several years ago, I was working with a high-end beauty brand, and I worked with them pretty frequently on a lot of different campaigns they were doing. And so they reached out and they said, we would love to work with you on this campaign for International Day of the Girl. We are promoting the importance of women being educated. And I was like, done. Like, I'm in. I love that. At the time, I was also teaching at an all-girls school, so I was like, I'm in. I think this is great. So they sent me the graphic that they wanted me to share on my Instagram account, and when I looked at it, I was like, I can't share this. Because the way that it was worded, it made it sound like if you are educated, well, if you are uneducated, you have large families, you have sick children, and you got married really early in your life. But if you're educated, you get married later and you have small families and your children are healthy. And I was like, I'm the oldest of 9. My mom is a highly educated woman who also was a professional, was working, ran her own lab for a while, like very smart woman, got married early, had 9 children. And I was just like, oh, I don't know. And so I thought about just not saying anything to the brand at all, or just not posting it. And then I thought, no, like, to be my authentic self, and I've worked with this brand a lot, I should write back to them and tell them why I'm not going to share this. And so I wrote back and I said, listen, like, I love what you guys are doing, that you're trying to promote education, especially for vulnerable girls who might not be able to be educated. Here's my problem with this campaign. So I'm going to pass. on this opportunity, right? Turned away money and was worried I was going to break this relationship with this company that I'd worked with fairly significantly over the last year or so. And I heard nothing for the first week from the company, and I thought for sure, like, this was done. It was over. This wasn't happening. And then a week after I had sent the email, they wrote me back and they said, we're so sorry it took us so long to get back to you. We took what you said, we took it back to our marketing team, we remade all of the graphics for this campaign, and here's the new one, because you're right, that was the message that was being sent, but that was not the message we meant to convey. And so, thank you. But I think that can be the power of showing up authentically online, and it can be scary, and it can mean you're kind of turning things away, or it could mean you alienate some people, but it can also mean that you're having a really powerful impact on the person who are the people who are consuming your content. So authenticity is really important in showing up on social media as who you are, not as who you think people want you to be. And then the third is the idea of being, social media wants you to be a passive consumer, and a lot of these apps want you to be a passive consumer, and I want you instead to think, how can I be an intentional user? So if you haven't seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix, I highly recommend you watch it. It's a great, pretty clear, it's about an hour or so, a little bit longer, kind of documentary on social media and the creation of it, and how it was designed using human psychology to get you to be a passive consumer, where you are just endlessly consuming content because they make money the more time you spend on their apps. And the guy who put this documentary out, his name is Tristan Harris, and he was really instrumental in a lot of these social media apps early on. And then he had this like moment of conscience and was like, okay, no, things need to change. And so he left. He was working at Google at the time. He left. He started this new program to really help people be kind of intentional users with new technology. But he says this in The Social Dilemma. He said, we're training and conditioning a whole new generation of people that when we are uncomfortable or lonely or uncertain or afraid, we have a digital pacifier for ourselves. And this is the perfect explanation of the difference between the intentional user versus the mindless kind of consumer. We can often use social media and technology and, Candy Crush or TikTok or whatever as kind of that digital pacifier. We're tired, so we're just gonna get on our phone and scroll. We're not feeling well, we're gonna get on our phone and scroll. Not in COVID times, but in other times, we're at a networking event and we're feeling uncomfortable, so we're just gonna get on our phone and scroll, and we're gonna look really important and really busy because we're on our phone, right? But in reality, it's just a digital pacifier. And so to take that step back and think, okay, how can I be a really intentional user with social media in this way? So a couple ways that we can do it is to set screen time limits and or set downtime hours. So these are the names for them on iPhones. They're similarly named on Androids. But a screen time limit allows you to set either the number of hours or the number of minutes you want to spend on a specific app or a specific type of app. So maybe you lose most of your time on Instagram. And you want to, okay, I'm going to allow myself only to spend, 30 minutes a day on Instagram. And you can set that up directly in your phone. So then after 30 minutes, your phone is going to pop up a little warning and be like, you've reached your limit, right? And it gives you that extra pause. Now you can override that if you really want to, but it causes you to pause and have to be intentional with the decision to override it, as opposed to just keep going. And downtime hours too. Downtime is my favorite part of iPhone. You can set it up so that at a certain time every night, all of your icons for all of your apps go gray. They basically all stop working until you have that turned off the following morning. So for me, I have downtime hours set at 8 p.m. every night until 8 a.m. the next morning. So for those 12 hours, none of my icons, none of the apps work. Now again, I can choose to override it, but it takes 2 different taps to override that. So it's 2 intentional decisions to override that app if I want to get on it and check Instagram or send an email or whatever that happens to be. So these can be really good ways for us to kind of take back and be really intentional. Another thing that we can do is disable that automatic play that comes up on YouTube or Netflix. So think of when you're on Netflix, you're watching something, maybe you come home from work, it's been a long day, you're like, I'm just gonna watch one show, right? One episode. The episode ends and Netflix automatically starts the next one within 5 seconds. You don't even have to get up from your phone. You don't have to press anything. You don't have to do anything. It will just automatically start it for you. Why? Because it's taking the decision out of your hands and it's making you just a passive consumer, right? It's just starting all over again. But you can actually go into the settings of Netflix and change that so that every time you want to watch the next episode, you have to manually click next episode. Now, yes, it's a small little thing, but it's allowing you to be intentional with your use of social media and your use of technology. You can do the same on YouTube. You know how YouTube shows you the next video they're gonna play based on what you already watched, and then it just starts that next video. You can disable that as well. And then setting a tech-free day each week, I think, can also be a really helpful thing to do, to think, okay, maybe my Sundays or my Saturday or my Friday, whatever day, is going to be a tech-free day, and I'm going to try and really separate myself from technology. It's good for your eyes to not be in front of all that blue light all day long. It's good for our minds. It's good for our hearts, our souls, everything, right? To just kind of separate for a little bit and be much more intentional with the way that we use it. And to keep in mind that, again, that social media apps, all of them, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Netflix, right? They make money off the more time you spend. Right? And so they want you to be a passive consumer. They want you to just be on and just be endlessly scrolling, right? That's the way they're designed, Pinterest. And so we want to kind of take back some of that ownership to make this our own. So those are the 3 top things that I would say to think through as we're thinking through social media. I do want to make a couple comments about social media and children and your children, since this is about social media and families. Before we open it up for questions. So I run a lot of different youth programs. I've worked with a lot of kids over the years, and I actually give talks like this to a lot of high school leadership programs. So I have a fair amount of knowledge, but I have no children of my own, full disclosure. But a couple things I think is good when we're thinking children and social media. And I think first is to talk about it and to talk about it often. That very frequently I hear parents who have no idea what social media apps their children even have, right? They're clueless as to what their children are doing or why they're on, or if they even have them. And a lot of parents I've talked to have been like, oh, I don't think my daughter has that, or I don't think my son has that. And I'm like, well, you should ask, and you should talk about these kinds of things. And I think it's really good to start talking about them early. And like, where did you see that? What are you seeing? What are you seeing when you get on TikTok? What are these things? And have those conversations, have them the very open and honest conversations about them frequently. And I think probably starting pretty young now. You know, just yesterday, my niece is in town and she was on her little tablet. She's in 2nd grade on her tablet watching something she shouldn't have been. And her grandpa caught her and got her in trouble, right, for watching it. And so then they had this whole conversation about proper use of YouTube, right, while she's on her tablet, which she's not supposed to be on, right? So talking about these things often is good. The second thing I think is to ease them into it. Often I hear people say, okay, my child's not going to have social media at all in middle school or in high school, and then they can choose to have it if they want in college. And I think for most children, that's probably the wrong approach. You wouldn't say to your 16-year-old, I'm not taking you driving, you're not taking driving lessons, but the day you turn 16, I'm handing you the keys to the car, have fun. You wouldn't do that, right? You take them out, they gotta get all their hours in, they gotta take the test, they gotta take the driving class, right? They have to pass the test. You ease them into the process. I mean, when I started driving, my dad took me to the graveyard, to the local cemetery, and took me there because he's like, you can't kill anyone here, so we'll drive here, right? You ease them into it, right? You learn how to do it. And I think the same with social media. So to think maybe, okay, early on, and it's gonna depend on your child, it's gonna depend on their age and their maturity level, but to think, okay, is there one app that maybe they can start and they can get their feet wet and we can do this kind of together? So maybe that means you have the passwords too to that account so that the two of you can kind of see them together. Or maybe you look through it together sometimes and just kind of discuss it and talk about what you're seeing on that app, or maybe you're following their account. But I think it can be really harmful, and I've noticed this happens a lot, when they don't know how to use these things and they don't know how to use them well and they haven't been given good criteria early on. I see a lot of abuse then later on. And girls and boys finding themselves in situations online especially where like they're not sure how they got there, because they just didn't have, they just didn't know how to navigate it. And even though this generation, right, the Gen Z generation, and then younger, I forget what they call them now. They have a name, the really, really young ones. Even though they all grew up with social media, right? All the Gen Zers, iPhones have existed since they were born, right? Instagram's been around since they were like toddlers. So they've all grown up with this, but at the same time, just like anything, they don't necessarily know how to use it and how to use it well. And so easing them in and having that conversation is important. I think also setting very clear boundaries and expectations of what you expect and from their behavior, from their online presence, and to be very, very clear with them and to have those conversations, again, frequently with them. So maybe that means a clear boundary is no smartphones or no computers in bedrooms, right, in your household, just to keep that barrier and to just kind of protect them a little bit more. Maybe that means that, at certain ages they can have certain things. So maybe they can get an email, at, I don't know, whatever, 14, and then they can get their first social media account at 16. Again, it's going to depend on your child and your family and all of that, but to kind of think that through and think, okay, what are these boundaries? And then what are the expectations I have of my child on here, and have I communicated that clearly, right? That you will not communicate with strangers, right? That you will not friend somebody who you do not know, that you will not, whatever that happens to be. And then having phone-free times and spaces in your family, also a really good time. So maybe that's family dinner, and all of you put your phones away during that time. Or maybe after a certain time at night, the internet shuts off in your house and you no longer have access to those things, so that the kids can focus on their studies, so that you guys can have family time together and be together, and whatever it happens to be. I have a cousin who has a basket by his front door, and anytime his children's friends come over, every smartphone, every cell phone goes into the basket. And all the parents of his children's friends know that if they want to get a hold of that child, they need to call the house phone or his cell phone or his wife's cell phone, and they won't be able to reach them on the child's cell phone, because the child's cell phones are separate so that the kids can play with each other and have a good time and not be on their phones. So again, every family's different. You got to think, what's going to work well for your family and for your child. And then one other thing that I will say is the importance of talking about this, because to not be naive that your child doesn't have it. This I just found frequently that a lot of children have accounts that their parents don't know about, right? Or they have extra accounts. They call it Finsta, right? Fake Instagram accounts, right? You have the fake account that your parent sees, and then you have the real account that everybody else sees. And so obviously, you can't totally control that, but if we're talking about it often, if we're setting clear boundaries, if we're having communication about that, that's going to be a lot less frequent. And so to know that they want this, they're going to probably have it, and so to really think through, what's going to work well for your family and how can you protect them in that way. And so just to end, I'm going to end with kind of another positive note on social media and something that's cool that I've been able to do through being an Instagram influencer. But a couple years ago, before the pandemic, Facebook actually reached out to me and said, we're doing a campaign, and we want to work with a bunch of different influencers in the area, and we have targeted different Facebook groups that are doing positive service projects around the Christmas season, and we'd love to work with you during one of them. For this Facebook group called Military Moms. And these military moms were mothers of military members who gathered together to wrap gifts and then send gifts to children of deceased or deployed military members. And so I got to go and help wrap hundreds of gifts for these children. And I was talking to the woman who runs the group, and she said without social media, without the Facebook group, none of this would have come together. None of it would have been possible. And she had started the Facebook group just as a way for her to connect with other military moms, because she was feeling very kind of alone when her son deployed. And then she found other moms who were feeling the same, and they really came together in this community, and then they started hanging out, and then they started getting coffees together, and then they would come together again on the Facebook group, and they would share, I don't know what to do about this. Does anyone have any suggestions? Or what should I send to my son who's in Kuwait right now, and what shouldn't I send? Don't send him chapstick. It'll melt in the mail. Send him whatever. And And then through this Facebook group, they were also able to pull all the gifts together to get all the donations that they needed and to get all of the volunteers that they needed to put together this service project to give 500 children a Christmas that year. And so, again, that's just another small example of the greatness of social media. And I think we don't share enough of the good stories behind it. And we often share a lot of the scary things. And so I just want to leave you all with that before we go into the questions. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, Katy, there's a gigantic series of gaps. Like years ago, they used to talk about the generation gap. Between people that, especially, it's most pronounced, people that are baby boomers, like people that are born before 1960, and those at varying degrees that are born after that. How? My question is about resources. For someone that's not all that familiar with how this works, particularly the people of the baby boomer generation and those immediately after that, are there places they can go to get educated about this so that they know what you're even talking about? Okay.
I'm trying to think if there are any resources that I would necessarily think of. I mean, there are a lot of different websites about social media kind of in general that share news and information about that. So you could almost follow that, or even I often will scroll through Google News, and they have a social media section, and I'll just kind of scroll through there and look at the various headlines and kind of see okay, what are people talking about? What is this? Just to kind of get a general idea. It's not very specific, but
well, let me see if I can hone it a little bit sharper. The people that are going to be listening to this particular episode are people with traditional values, people who accept the Judeo-Christian view of life. That is a view of life that, quite frankly, does not seem to be favored by the bigwigs of the social media.
This is true.
Okay, and so is there a place where people of traditional values can go and not be marginalized and receive information of the type that you're giving now, but even more specific? They can say, what are some of the sites to watch out for? How do you watch out for it? A lot of the details where the traditional values people are completely outspent and outgunned.
Yes. So I think one of the things that I always tell people is to remember that on social media and on the internet in general, you vote with your clicks. And so if you want to see more of traditional values, you have to click on those kind of articles. And you need to not click on the type of articles that aren't promoting that. And I think we often get very caught up in this goes against my thing, and click, read, send it to my family members to also be this is bad. So look at this craziness. But every time we do that, we're telling all of these social media outlets, we want more of this content. And so it's almost better to not add our clicks to all of that kind of stuff and then start adding our clicks to other things. I think Father Robert Barron, for instance, does a great job on social media. He's on social media a lot. Or you think of Father Mike Schmitz and his, Bible in a Year podcast, #1 podcast in the country for months. Because people are clicking and sharing. And we have the power to do that with social media and through our clicks. And so kind of thinking a little more strategically almost about what we do and what we consume and who we follow, and to not follow people who not necessarily follow only people who think the way that we think, but to kind of think a little more strategically about our clicks and the way that we spend our time that way.
One question I think a lot of people have when you start talking about the Frankenstein's monster that sometimes can be created in this. So where does all this information go and who's looking at it? Because all of a sudden, I remember one time, I just made a wrong click and I came up with a screen that I just felt it was bad. I don't know why. It was like a black screen and there was kind of funny stuff going on. And quite frankly, for about a week after that, I got out of it. I was afraid. No. For about a week after that, though, I started getting solicitations for all kinds of pornography. It was a bad site. Okay.
Yeah.
Who knew that? How is it going? How does this work? And who are these people looking at these things?
So it's no person necessarily, right? It's computers, and it's the algorithm that kind of looks at it and knows a lot about you based on other sites you've looked at, other things that you've gone to, and then then the algorithm, the computer brain basically starts sending you those things. So to give you an example, my brother's getting married, so all of the girls in my family are trying to find dresses to wear to this wedding, right? Really a complicated thing during COVID because you can't go try anything on. So now all of my Facebook ads are dresses for weddings. All of them, right? And it's not that I've said, please make all of my ads, but they see my internet search, right? They have the little cookies, right? They'll kind of follow me around the internet and know what I'm doing. And so then they think they know what they want to give me more of. And sometimes that works in my benefit. Like I found some really great dresses that way, but sometimes it doesn't. If you ended up somewhere where you shouldn't, and then suddenly you're getting all these extra things, because that's the way.
What is, one of the things that's come out, and even in some of the congressional hearings that have been lately, is that there is a conscious effort to actually not just respond to our needs or our likes, but to mold us in a certain direction.
Yeah.
Are you aware of any kind of antidotes that we can make to avoid this kind of molding, or is there some kind of pushback that people of traditional values can do to try to make sure that whoever the geniuses or so-called or fiends that maybe be sitting somewhere trying to influence this may not be able to make the success that they're trying to achieve?
Yeah, again, I think that comes back to like being really intentional with the way that we show up on these things, the things that we post, the things that we share, the things that we give our eyes to versus the things that we don't, and being very intentional with that. Because again, it's all based on the attention economy, right? And if they have your economy, and if they think that's what you want more of, they're going to give you more of that. And so I think it really comes back to,
well, how it's true. I probably get every Catholic.
Yeah, exactly.
You can think about it.
Yeah, and it's really interesting if you watch The Social Dilemma, they talk about that most people, or I'm reading this book right now called Love Your Enemies. And it's all about like, how do we bridge this gap between the conservative and the liberal in our country? Like, how do we find the connecting factors? And he has this interesting stat in there that most people have 5 Facebook friends who think almost exactly like they do to every one who thinks differently. And so if that's all you're seeing in your feed is mostly people who think exactly the same as you, you think everybody thinks that way. Right? And so, but that's also part of the algorithm and the way that it's worked, so that you are only seeing that, but it's creating this larger divide in our society because we're just seeing things that way. So
how exactly do they make the money? I mean, the wealth of Google, the wealth of some of these movers and shakers is amazing. How do they make the money?
Oh, they make the money. So, I mean, they make it basically from being able to put ads in front of you. So if you're spending 15 minutes just scrolling through Facebook kind of endlessly, you can see an X number of ads during that time. And so a company pays basically for your eyes. So these dress companies that are trying to get my eyes now, right? They're paying for every time a new eye sees their ad, and that's and then Facebook gets the money from that, or Instagram, or
interesting. Well, let's see. Are there any questions here from either the Peanut Gallery or out there in the world of video land? Anybody have any questions they want? Yes, Heidi.
Katy, can you explain what an influencer is?
Oh yeah. Honestly, everybody is an influencer, but an influencer who has the job as an influencer is somebody who collaborates with different brands and different companies to inform and influence their followers to buy a certain thing or attend a certain thing or whatever. So to give you an example, right now I'm working with the Missouri Tourism Association or whatever to help drive tourism from the Midwest to Missouri. Because it's kind of
Lake of the Ozarks and all that kind of stuff.
So they're working with all these different influencers, and they each have a different part of Missouri that they're going to go to. They're going to write about, and they're going to share with their followers. So I got to go and visit the Budweiser Clydesdale farm.
That's kind of
out in Boonville, Missouri. Exactly. And I got to see the foals, write about it, have a free beer, and then I'll share that with my followers so that hopefully some of them will then go visit Missouri and maybe go see this farm in Boonville or go visit Lake of the Ozarks or the Arch or something like that. So, yeah.
So they buy your contacts?
Yeah, they're basically buying my audience. Yeah.
Well, 75 years ago, there was a famous book written by George Orwell called 1984, which the thesis of the book was the government, it was a worldwide series of totalitarian governments that split up the world into 3 parts.
Yeah.
And they were watching everything. They didn't realize that they were watching. Well, that was tame compared to what is happening now. I mean, they're really watching everything.
Yeah.
And I have some friends who have basically taken, the Luddite position, say, I'm not going to have a Facebook account. I'm not going to have an email. I don't do any of that. But I don't really think you can do that. I mean, I think that's just basically denial of the world in which we live.
I think it's a lot harder to change the culture if you don't have any of that.
That's exactly, I agree with you.
Play a really large role in the changing of culture if you learn how to use these things and you learn how to use them well.
How do you impact whoever these people are watching it, other than with clicks onto traditional value sites, to give a fair shake to other positions?
I don't really know if you can.
Yeah, I don't know if you can either.
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot more of that comes down to kind of one-on-one conversations and getting to know people, as opposed to like just leaving a comment on somebody who's like wrong, like that you want to point out that they have a misguided notion about something. One
of the things that's another phenomenon that a lot of people have commented on is how the quasi anonymity of the social media has led to a brutality and a lack of manners that is pretty horrible. I mean, when you think about, like, I was watching some of the movies from the 1930s, and just the almost courtliness of the way that people interacted with people when they had to do it face to face, it went the way of the Buffalo nickel. Okay, why is that, and is there anything that can be done to combat it?
I think, again, a lot of that comes from, the anonymity, but that you're not seeing a person behind it. So one of the things that I always, like, whenever I talk to like groups, especially of like high school students about this, is making sure that you're always seeing a person behind every post you see, every account that you come across. Like, remember, like, there's another person who has dreams and hopes and aspirations and fears
human being
behind each of these things.
Child of God.
And we miss those. We miss that fact, and we just see this picture that we don't like or this caption that we don't like, and suddenly we're like so mad, and we miss, like, there's another beautiful soul there that I need to respect, and I need to think about the way that I respond or the way that I interact in that way. And so remembering that, I think, is
Are there any books or package presentations that you would recommend to someone to equip themselves in this field?
No.
Ask an honest question, get an honest answer.
Yeah, right? No, but I am thinking of making one, so maybe stay tuned for that. But no, I don't.
Well, there, it speaks to a real need, folks. So thank you. I think this, as you can see, this opens up a lot. Oh, Gary, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. I mean, I don't have children, but let's say how your family does.
Sure.
And what if they haven't paid attention to any of this stuff?
I know.
It's almost too late. How can you go back and correct this?
That's a good question.
For them with their children, or for them in general?
With them in general, or with your children?
So what I always tell people, if you are new to all of this, just pick one platform and just start there. And just start there and just start learning about it. Because the general idea is the same across all platforms. So just pick one and then kind of get on and start kind of diving in a little bit to just learn a little bit more about it, to kind of have the lingo and just have the know-how behind it. So if you like more image focused things, to like get on Instagram and just kind of have an account and see. And I know a lot of people who have accounts but don't post, but they're kind of consuming to figure out like what is happening, what's going on. So that would be my suggestion, like get an account and kind of see a little bit. And then there's so many news articles that come out pretty frequently now about social media. And so just kind of dial into that and on occasion kind of read about that just to see what's up and what's going on. And then I think too, like, talking to the younger generations and just asking them, like, what are you seeing? Like, tell me about this thing. And like, they're probably going to roll their eyes at you a little bit and be like, wait, what? You don't know what TikTok is or whatever, but they know so much about it, really. And so you can have these really good conversations with them. So that would be some of my suggestions. Yeah.
I think one of the lessons that we learned tonight from what Katy is telling us is a very positive one, and it's the importance of living by truth. So much of, in the old days, advertising and so much of what happens on social media is really artificial media, an artifice.
Right.
And after a while, it just sort of implodes because it's just one person, who can lie, who can tell the tallest tales. And that gets us so far away from what humanity is supposed to be, and the search that we all have for the good, the true, and the beautiful. That's what we should do. That's what we should live, whether we're on the social media or walking our dog.
Yeah.
The honesty and the integrity is what we need, especially as Christians, to be able to communicate to the world. And if that means perhaps someone raising an eyebrow on it, so be it, because it's better to be true than it is to be false. Because when you're false, you really have no identity at all. So thank you very much, Katy.
You're welcome.
We'll be back with more stuff for the future. Stay tuned to St. Mary of the Angels. We're going to have something to try to help the family in every way that we can. We'll be back again with another thing next season. Thank you for listening.
Great.